Welcome to the Drawing Board. I'm your host and in-house artist, Erin Leffler. If you joined me before here on the Drawing Board, welcome back. If this is your first time with me, here's a quick rundown of what happens here on the show. Every episode of the Drawing Board, I invite a guest from around the entertainment industry, and we learn a little bit more about what they do. And when we learn about what they do, I'm also drawing them in real time. Pretty fun, right? Well, I am super excited to introduce y'all to my guest today because this is somebody who I am a big fan of, and I'm sure a lot of you are a big fan of his work, and you just don't know it. He's made a lot of cool art contributions into the industry, but he's also worked on some things that you may know. Working on things like the Angry Birds movie, Hop, and Star Wars The Clone Wars. He's done a lot of cool things, and I'm so excited for you guys to meet him. Please welcome my guest, Matt Gaser. Hi there!
Hey, thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so much. So excited to get to chat with you today. For my kiddos, though, who may not be familiar with your work, because I did mention a few things that they are familiar with, though. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yes, I'm what they call a concept artist. So I design and illustrate artwork in terms of environments, designing characters, worlds, props, creatures, all kinds of things for mostly animated movies and animated TV series style projects, as well. Live action movies too, but that's a lot less. That's more rare. And then I also design EDM concerts as well, specifically the Daydream Festival, designing sets and stages for them and poster design.
Wow, that is pretty incredible. I haven't had anybody on here designing stuff for concerts yet, so that's an avenue we're definitely going to have to talk about because that sounds pretty neat. I have to ask, though, how long have you been doing this?
About 18 years. I graduated from Art Center College of Design in 2001. And do you want me to talk about my career just really quick? Or yeah, I mean,
Yeah, absolutely. Go for it.
I got my start interning on the animated show Rugrats, doing like an internship while I was still going to school. And then after graduating, I got a job in the game industry, designing concept art for movie-based video games, specifically The Lord of the Rings, Two Towers, Aragon, the movie. And then I moved on to Lucasfilm, like she said, working with the team over there on the Clone Wars animated series. It was the first 3D animated TV series at the time, and that was really exciting. And then I got tired of lightsabers and clone troopers, so I moved on to doing freelance work, and I've been doing that ever since, and it's been a lot of fun.
That is awesome. And you actually touched on something that I love asking after I talk about how long you've been doing it, was you mentioned that you graduated from college. This is an interesting thing because there's a lot of different opinions on it.
Yes.
When it comes to this industry in particular, do you think that it's necessary for kids to go to a structured schooling setting like colleges, or do you think that they can also learn kind of outside on their own?
I feel like you can do both. It's kind of funny you bring that up because I was on a panel last night with Savannah College Art of Design, as well with 5 other guys I graduated with, and we were all debating on what that really means right now. There's like so many avenues for people that are talented but need the education. I would say my daughter, she's 10, if she was like, 18 and wanted to go to an art school, I mean, I would be so proud of her if she got into Art Center. But the cost is just insane. It's basically a mortgage on a house. You're looking at like after rent, supplies, food, and then tuition, it's almost like 230,000. And I mean, when I graduated, it was about 160 grand. I'm still paying for that right now. And so you really have to be focused and decide if that's really truly what you want to do. If you're kind of on the fence, you're not kind of sure what kind of art you want to get into, I might do a junior college at first and just take some art classes that way, build your portfolio, get some general ed under your belt. And but yeah, I mean, if you can afford it, go for it. If you can't, still go for it. I mean, I like I was talking about it last night with these guys. My parents put collateral from their home mortgage to afford my loan. So I was really pushed and motivated during art school to excel, because if I didn't succeed, my parents would lose their house. And it was a lot riding on that, but fortunately they saw my drive, my talent, my skills, and and it worked out. So, but yeah, I mean, places like the Gnomon Workshop, there's a lot of other different portals where you can, pay a smaller fee and get a lot of different, audio and visual workshops going. And some of them even offer a mentorship where you can actually talk to someone that's a professional. And also just reach out to people like me, like what you're doing, and just ask questions. And I'm always willing to give reviews on people's work. I've even helped students with their projects, just kind of giving them, feedback and how to improve their layout and their, compositional issues they may be working through. And so, yeah, just there's a lot of options. I can get into the details, but on the surface, it just comes down to what you want to do, and make sure you know what you want to do.
I am so glad you brought up the fact about these like smaller programs. There's a lot of them online now that you can look up that have to do with this field too. So I'm glad you brought that up, and also mentorships, because that's the thing I think a lot of people forget. They think like college is the only way to learn, but mentorships is a great way of learning different skills and trades in this industry.
Absolutely. I mean, my art director, when I was working in the games industry, I was 26 at the time, and he was like somewhere around 48 years old. He had already worked with Disney and a lot of other different projects through Warner Brothers. And I really didn't have a real good mentor at that point. I'd say the closest thing was my colleagues and roommates during college. They were exceptionally talented in so many different other ways than I was, and so they influenced me as well. But my art director, working on the game industry, just really pushed me to look at other artists and other styles and try to emulate that in my own way for their project. Going back to the history books a little bit, and just grabbing work that could be inspiring, and then using that to influence your work. So I in that sense, I think a mentor is crucial. They'll push you in ways you don't expect. They'll help you grow. And I just try and surround myself with smarter people in my life, in every facet of my life, even down to finance. My wife is super good at numbers. I'm not. I mean, kind of a classic thing for an artist, can't do math very well. But that same can be applied for art. And I feel like if you're around a lot of talented people, you're going to grow really fast, and they're going to teach you the stuff they know. So.
For sure. I love that answer. I think that's a great thing for any kid who's interested in this industry to keep in mind. So, yes. A little bit of a fun question before we get into more serious ones. I love talking about this because a lot of times when I was doing Comic-Cons, I heard this sentiment iterated by many kids, and I think it's because of a lot of things we see on social media and on the media itself. A lot of people think that the only way to be good at a job and to excel in it is to kind of participate in this like hustle culture that you can't do anything else but your job. That's all you have to do to exist 24/7. But we're very multifaceted creatures as humans. We have a lot of likes and dislikes. So I love chatting a little bit about hobbies and if they help us be better at our jobs. So for you, do you think hobbies actually help you be better at a job? And if so, do you have any?
I do. I have a lot of them. I'm a woodworker. I'm really into gardening. I just built this like super modern facade to my fence with a planter box recently. Last year, I built this architectural wall in our backyard by the fire pit, and I designed this metal architectural design that got laser cut out of steel, and then I backlit it and everything. And I had no clue what I was doing, but I had the general sense of just construction, and I knew how to work with materials. My dad was a woodworker, bird carver, life size. I mean, he like carved realistic birds out of wood and then painted them all real. Wow. And my mom was a creative writer and stuff. And so the influences from them, going to school, just opened my mind on like, creativity and where you can apply that. My neighborhood is your typical suburban cookie cutter neighborhood, but my house stands out as this odd house that has all these weird things to it that are, beautiful plants, and trying to, plant flowers in a way where the colors are going to go and the height of the plants are going to gradually come off the sidewalk towards the house in sort of a gradual way. And if a plant gets too big, I'll uproot it and move it to an area where it can, become larger and make more sense. And so aside from concept art and illustration and creating books and stories, getting outside and just enjoying the sun and being creative is also a fun hobby of mine.
That is awesome. Do you think that helps you mentally do better at your work, or does it kind of just like supplement as like, oh, this is just fun?
Yeah, I think if you do one thing for too long, you're going to get a little stale, and you need to percolate your imagination in other ways. Taking hikes, traveling is a huge thing. Obviously, that's expensive, but you can travel in your local areas, find trails, find creeks, waterfalls, beaches, deserts, wherever you may live. There's always a unique place you could probably go to that will just inspire you and get you motivated. And then when you come back into the office or the studio and you're working, you're charged up. Your tank is full. So it's always about trying to keep that tank full, I suppose.
Absolutely. So now to get into some of those serious questions I was talking about before. A lot of people know that this industry, because there are so many talented people that work in this industry, it can be a highly competitive place to get a job, which may be a little challenging to some kids who aren't as competitive as, say, those who play sports. Do you think that they should focus on trying to be more competitive to get into the industry and get their work out there, or do you think that they can find a healthy balance where they can also learn from others who do the same thing as them as well as make friends with them?
Oh, I think the latter is crucial. Making alliances in your career can start in school. In fact, a lot of my friends and colleagues that I went to school with ended up becoming art directors, and they eventually hired me for work down the road. And if I was a jerk or selfish and sort of introverted into my own, I don't think they would be so willing to give me that kind of work. I honestly, it comes down to contacts. You have to be, really good at communication. And you have to be really smart about making alliances and friends with people that are like-minded and want you to succeed. I think you don't want to make friends with people that when you get a big paycheck they get jealous or something like that. You want to find people that prop you up and pat you on the back. I do that with all my friends, and I think as a collective we can all grow together and share our experiences and get inspired by other people's success.
Absolutely. And I love that you brought up about having the right attitude because that's something I think is very important when it comes to this. Do you think that having a bad attitude or coming across like you have a chip on your shoulder can affect how you're viewed in this industry?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, ultimately it really comes down to your product, how good you are at your work. But, that's just sort of a piece of the pie. I mean, if you're not a good communicator, like I said, or just nice in general, people may hire you and think you're a jerk, and then you'll get that one gig, but they may not call you back. So, I think having a little humor, a little humility in you is good too. I never thought that I knew everything. I always think I can still learn, even today. And in life, people will come to you with an opportunity. It's up to you to decide, do I want to take that opportunity and do something with it? Or do I want to push it aside because I have my own dream goals? And if you just accept these little Easter eggs that, these little golden tickets that will come in your life sometimes and, with open arms, even if it's something you're not quite excited about, down the road, that will grow in a way that you may not expect. So I'll give you an example. When I got into Lucasfilm, I was a senior concept artist originally at a game studio, doing super creative work, very original work. And when I started working on the Clone Wars series, I was hired as a lighting concept artist. So my job was to paint on top of animatic stills. So essentially, when you create an episode back then, they would do it all in 3D in rough form, and they would take stills of the whole episode, and then they would hand them to me to paint on top of them to get the right lighting and color and backgrounds painted, so that they could then match that in the final shot. At first I was like, oh, this is a step down. I'm not really being fulfilled, and then I learned that, my gosh, doing 5 paintings a day and doing all this work was helping me grow internally, even though I didn't like it. and just the fact of working at the studio, when I eventually left, I'll give you an example. Like my producer, Catherine Winder, moved on to Angry Birds, and she hired me for that project. So that's how I got onto Angry Birds movies, because she liked my work. She liked who I was. I was a nice guy, and I got that job as well. So if I hadn't taken the job, or I left because I wasn't satisfied, I would never be where I'm actually at today. So, I mean, I think the main reason why I work on animated projects is because I took that job at Lucasfilm, even though I didn't like it very much. So,
But that's
so
a good point, though, about being content at the time, knowing that maybe it could help you out down the road, too. That can definitely
yeah,
help with an attitude.
yeah, I needed a big box studio under my belt to gain, traction and and just be, to push myself into the feature animated world, and that's where I ultimately wanted to go. I wanted to work on Pixar, DreamWorks style projects, and the only way to get there is to start somewhere. And so when I got into Lucasfilm, I thought this is it. I'm going to be here for the rest of my career, and a lot of my colleagues ended up staying. They still work there too. But I'm just I'm too creative, and I got too many things going on in my head creatively, where I just couldn't stay at one studio working on some project for like 5 to 6 years. And so that's why freelance actually has really worked out, because I can juggle a lot of projects at once. I can choose the ones I want to work on, and network. So.
Awesome. Now, going back to competition, I love pairing this with it because I think it kind of goes hand in hand. When competing for a job, oftentimes we get a lot of forms of rejection, whether it be getting rejected for a job, putting our work online, and maybe it not going over as well as we thought. That can be taken as rejection for kids as well. Do you think a rejection is something that a kid should take personally, or is it something they can use to also kind of help them learn to improve something in their work?
Well, it just depends on where that rejection is coming from. If it's coming from a friend that's jealous, or if it's coming from a particular area that's fueled through jealousy, then try and be intuitive a little bit and read through that and not take it personally. Other times, I've gotten critiques. You need more people in your work. I remember in the early years, I was just focused on environments, and I had an art director, a producer, years ago say, if you would just put people in your or characters in your scenes, you would have a whole new paradigm to your stuff. And so I started doing that because I was really into character design, I was really into environment design, but if I married the two, I would have a whole different product. It was more of a narrative piece, so so I took that critique, and I changed my way of doing my personal work, and it's never been the same ever since. So I have a lot to thank for that specific critique. I've had people say, all your work is so similar, or you always use the same colors all the time, and those things hit me, and I look at my own work in a different way, and then I change it up. I try more maybe monochromatic stuff, or challenge myself with a large crowd of people in a scene. How would I approach that? And so critiques can be very useful in growth. Absolutely.
And I love that you brought up critiques because that is something that is very widely used in the industry to improve and to help one another improve. But also, a lot of times, critiques can come from a lot of different places, and a lot of times now it comes on the internet from people who don't work in the industry. Is it important for kids to kind of figure out what critiques to listen to and how to weed out the ones that don't?
Yeah, I mean, I think it also comes down, excuse me, to finding portals that relate with the type of work that you want to do, and consume that kind of material and reference as much as possible. And if those involve critiques in that experience, then that's to your advantage, because it's about a particular subject that you're interested in, and you're going to help learn from that. So absolutely.
So a bit more of a fun topic. We're going to get back into some fun stuff, not all serious here. You've gotten to work on a lot of cool different things, but you've also worked in different avenues. You've worked with animation, you've worked with books, you've worked with posters and stuff for concerts, which I think is pretty incredible. Do you ever find it hard to switch back and forth between these different avenues, or is it kind of easier for you to do that?
No, I love a good challenge, and anything that comes across my desk that's interesting, I'll take it on. The EDM designing stages for concerts was a left field thing that came to me about 5 years ago. This company out of Brussels in Europe found my work, and I don't know how they found it. I never asked, but they wanted to give me a shot. So originally they were just going to have me design a poster and utilize my imagination and creativity for that. They had a basic idea of what they wanted, but then I gave them a rough and they were blown away, and I finished the poster for them. And then they were like, well, what do you think about designing the stage for us too? And that wasn't originally on the table, and I've never done that before, but it's no different than anything else. It's just using the same tool sets in a different way. I know design, I know proportion, I know what feels good, basically, just out of experience, lots of experience. And so I just use all those tools in a new way. And generally people that hire you for that kind of stuff are going to help you. They're going to help you learn. They're going to help you learn what they need out of you. And you just have to adapt and gravitate towards a mindset that's going to work for both sides, you as the employer or employee, and for the employer as well.
Adapting, I love that word because that is a very valuable skill to have in this industry. So glad you brought that up. I have to ask though, because there are different avenues that you've worked in, do you tend to favor any of those over the other
Oh
ones that
man,
you've done?
I mean, ultimately, I think making books is the coolest, funnest thing. I got a 2-book deal about 10 years ago to create my original fantasy series that I'm still working on. I'm working with a really good friend of mine. She's a writer, Mariah Bear, and the publishers Chronicle Books. And I've always wanted to make my own stories. And so one way I did that was actually publish my own art book right here. Fantastical, The Art of Matt Gazer, and it's just full of like all my work that's been on a shelf for many years. And even though people come to my website, this is a unique like business card in a way too. I can send this to an art director, and immediately they see what I'm capable of. So yeah, it's just all about making books for me. I think right now, working in animation, working on animated projects is a super dream still to this day. But I'm trying to work towards a place where I'm actually creating content for animation that's maybe a franchise that I've created. So I'm kind of putting all my projects that I've worked on into more of a pitch style format, so I can actually try and get Netflix or Amazon Prime or whatever to potentially turn some of my stuff into animated series and things like that. But that's so tough, and right now everyone's trying to do that. So but the best way to do that is to actually publish a book. So that's why I'm working hard with that 2-book deal right now.
Well, that is really cool, and I love the fact that you're saying about working on your own stuff, because I think that's also something really cool that people do in this industry, work on their own concepts. That's how we get a lot of our favorite stories that we see on screen. So super awesome. I love that.
Thank you.
So
Yeah.
a few more questions for you. I think these ones are pretty fun because they kind of span over the more important points. There's a lot of times in the industry where maybe things don't go as according to plan when we first do them, but they end up being a good thing in the end. Do you think it's okay for kids to know that they can make mistakes and sometimes they end up leading to the best results, or that mistakes happen and we just have to deal with them?
Yeah, I mean, and those mistakes can happen in all sorts of ways. It can, be a bad job decision. It could be a string of work that you did that you're not very proud of. It could be a drawing that you don't like very much. For drawing, I mean, if I do a terrible drawing, I throw it away. And a lot of teachers will say save everything. I think it's very therapeutic to throw it away or burn it. I've actually burnt my work as a way of in a bucket, having a bad day or whatever. Just throw the drawings in a bucket and light it, and it's kind of fun. But all the work that I do love, I'm really careful with it. I put it into a nice sleeve, and I create a catalog of drawings in a portfolio. Just that's kind of how I catalog all my sketches and drawings. All my painting work is done digitally, and so if I mess up on something, it's usually a layer, and I just delete the layer and I start over. I usually don't start a painting over completely. If I run into a struggle with a particular piece, I just try a bunch of new things or throw a texture in there and just see what happens. Sometimes a random mistake can actually work in your advantage through digital art. And traditional work too. If you're working in oils or paints and you just throw paint on there somehow, or you try a different method through watercolor or mixed media, you can come up with some really great solutions that way that you didn't expect when you first started the piece. So keeping an open mind is crucial, and not being too hard on yourself, and just constantly having a little gem of confidence that you put on your, like a little pin. Just keep that on your chest, and don't get discouraged. Just try not to get discouraged. The best way to battle being discouraged is through inspiration, getting inspired. So if I'm having a really tough time creatively, maybe I didn't get very much sleep the night before, putting on some really soothing music, maybe from your favorite movie, watching a great TV show that inspires you, getting on the internet and just researching a lot of images that might get you rolling. A lot of different ways you can do that.
Absolutely. And disclaimer, kids, we don't play with fire unless it's under supervision or unless you're an
That's
adult.
correct.
So always make sure you have
Yeah.
an adult present with fire.
My goodness, that was, yes. Don't play with fire. But I mean, throwing away bad work has helped me. I never really did that as a kid, though. I always kept my work because my mom would catalog it and make sure I kept it safe, because she was so proud of every little thing I did. And in retrospect, looking back when I was younger, at my even younger work, so like let's say if I was 18, looking back at the stuff I did when I was 10 years old was really fun. It was interesting to watch my brain grow and as my interests changed, going back in time. So I mean, that throwing away process is easier for me as a professional. But I mean, I think as a kid, definitely keep all your work. So it depends.
Exactly.
It's kind of a complicated answer, but there you go.
I love that. No, parents are very good. Parents love to like keep every little thing that their kid does. So
Yeah,
if you're fortunate where your parent kept every single piece that you've done, be thankful for it. You'll look back on it one day and you'll be laughing or smiling at whatever you did at that point.
exactly. Yes.
So, artists, we all are kind of, I like to say, we all have this big inner kid where we have so many things we still want to do and try because people a lot of times think once you reach a certain point, you've plateaued and there's nothing else to do. But we've always dreamed up something else that we want to try out one day. Is there anything that you haven't gotten to do yet, gotten to work with, or somebody you haven't gotten to work with that you'd like to eventually?
Great question. I have been considering hiring a storyboard artist to storyboard an animated short idea I've had in my head. And for people that don't know what shorts are, they're generally like it's like a TV series or TV shows, animated piece of content, but it's only like 2 or 3 minutes long, just telling a very quick story. Very expensive to produce or create. That's why I've never done it, but it's always has to start somewhere, and it generally starts with a good story first, and then you hire a storyboard artist to visualize that, or you can do it yourself. I'm too busy right now with a lot of the projects, so if I really wanted to push that opportunity that I wanted to achieve, it's good to bring other people in and create a team. And if you can't afford it, maybe it's good to partner with somebody and get them on board. And so, as a young kid, I had a lot of friends as well that were interested in art, and I surrounded myself with people like that. And we worked with each other on story ideas. And my mom would build costumes for us, and we'd go in the woods and we would reenact, our characters. I grew up in the redwoods, and so Star Wars was really a big deal. So we'd always pretend, we're Ewoks or Luke Skywalker or Han Solo and run around. And so again, it goes back to inspiration and just making sure you're around the right people all through your life.
For sure. And especially in an area like the Redwoods. That is a great place to get inspiration because that is one of the most beautiful places on the West Coast
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, to answer your question, yes, I would love to maybe direct a little animated short based on a story I've created. That's something I'd love to do.
That sounds so cool. I love hearing that during this pandemic. There's been like so many surges in artists that are like, I got an idea for a story. I want to make it out now. So I love hearing that. It always makes me so excited because it seems like the animation industry in general is thriving during this pandemic. We're seeing a lot of like smaller
Yes.
studios bring films out. We're seeing a lot
Yes.
more animated films compared to live action films coming out. So it's
Yes.
pretty exciting.
Yeah. I mean, we don't have to be at a set, you know, freaking out about, getting the virus or whatever. And we're all working from home. And so, like Warner Brothers, they're making an animated movie called DC Super Pets. It's about Batman and Superman's dogs and how they save their butt in these hard, these difficult situations. And so they brought me on, and I remember we had these big meetings on Zoom, and there was like 25, 30 people from all over the world working on this project. Every facet that you can imagine, from 3D modelers, texture artists, designers, animators, and the director would just go through all the work, and it was really cool to see. It was a collaborative international effort to make a movie.
Absolutely. And you just mentioned, especially like we're doing this over Zoom now, a lot of places are using it to do meetings for different films and everything. Do you think that there's more of an interest and more of a possibility of seeing people do work for animated companies remotely?
Yes, I mean, I've worked remotely for 10 years as a freelance concept artist, so using technology like Zoom has really helped. But it also comes down to getting the contacts you need, and getting into the industry in a way where you're utilizing your contacts to get the product that you want in terms of work or projects that you want to work on. But that's been a very gradual, long process for me. I'm 43 now, and it's taken me 20 years to get here. A lot of different projects I worked on in the early years I didn't really care to design for, but I had to out of necessity, because you got to pay the bills, you got to keep the lights on, you got to feed yourself. So you have to kind of take it in the gut, and do the best you can with projects you may not be too invested in. But over time, you'll start realizing, especially if your work is very tailored to a place that you want to grow your career, that people will start hiring you for what you do best. And the stuff, like the kinds of projects that will come across your desk, will be more tailored to the stuff that you want to do. And that doesn't happen overnight. It really doesn't. And you have to work really hard at that, and get the right people noticing your work that you want to work for. So it's a challenging juggling act of milking the contacts, and obviously having the talent and portfolio that will get the type of work you want to do.
Absolutely. I love that you bring up that it's very, very, you have to be very determined, it sounds like, for
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to have a drive. You have to really want, this career or whatever career you choose. And you have to keep up to date. And you also, like, we've talked about earlier in this interview, adapt. You have to really be able to adapt to things, changing trends, styles. I mean, I really love science fiction. Well, maybe a project comes across my desk where it's sci-fi, but everything has to be very 2D and flat. The style is very challenging, and I'm more of an immersive, illustrative guy in terms of an artist. I like to create scenes that are, surreal or hyper real in some way because of the way they're lit or textured. What if a project came across my desk that is super flat, very graphic? Maybe they see my creative abilities and they want to challenge me with that style. So I'll freak out at first. I'll get very nervous and very stressed out. And then, once I get into the project and I start understanding it and they start liking what I'm doing, then that builds confidence, and you can start, growing on that project and learning as well. And then you come out of that with a whole new subset of things that you've learned from that project that you may not have in the past. So even though you may be afraid, use that fear to your advantage to learn.
Absolutely. And with you being in the industry for as long as you have, I'm sure you've seen a lot of changes happening. And especially recently, we're seeing this influx of so many different people that we haven't seen in the industry before. I love seeing this because we're getting so many new stories and so many new faces getting to work on jobs maybe that they didn't have the chance to before. Do you think it's important for kids to be able to see these people who maybe look like them, speak the same language that they do, come from the same places that they do, doing the jobs that they want to one day?
Yeah, I mean, getting on Instagram and Facebook and social media, and following the artists that you really admire is crucial. I mean, that's another source of inspiration that you're not going to get any other way. And if they follow you or you follow them, obviously you have the access to message them directly. When I was coming out of school, that was not even possible. I mean, the internet was barely a thing. Facebook hadn't been created yet. Instagram was years away. And the only thing I could really use was LinkedIn to try and find work. And that was pretty amazing even at that time. But now there's so many other ways to follow great artists and people that haven't really been found yet are on there that are super talented. And so by even following them, you're supporting their work and they're inspiring you. So we had this conversation last night, actually. It's really interesting. Instagram is a strange place, and it's really driven by the amount of people that are following you, less than the quality of work that you're doing. A lot of the professionals that I work with and stuff, they have they're super talented, they're super well known, but the amount of people following them on Instagram may be like 3,000 or 6,000 or 12,000 in my case, right? Other artists that are for whatever reason, and that's the secret thing that we're trying to crack right now is like how do artists that have barely worked in the industry and their work is not maybe not even as good, and somehow they have like 100,000 to almost 500,000 followers, and so ad agencies and different people trying to get artists will sometimes look at their following as a way to see if they're really viable enough to hire or use, rather than the actual quality of the work on their site. Because if they work on a project and then they promote that on their Instagram and they have 100,000 followers, then that's an advantage to their employer, right? So so it's difficult and it's extremely challenging and confusing right now. And I'm still trying to figure that out. I want more followers. I think everyone does, and it's not out of vanity though. It's just out of how this industry is changing and what it means to have more followers to get work and to be accepted in that space as a viable resource for other people.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought up the whole thing about social media because that is a very huge thing with art these days. That's a lot of times how we get seen for our work and everything. Does the numbers count, though, when it comes to work?
It does, in the sense that the more people that follow you, the more people you can promote your work to. I do Comic Cons as well. I used to. We don't do Comic Cons anymore right now, and I hope that comes back someday. But for example, I've invested a lot of money into different products like books. I even built this little toy here on Kickstarter, and it's like this little robot guy. He's got like a battery pack and a little plug for charging him. He's a math professor in this fantasy world. You build that product, right? And I used to go to Comic Cons and it would sell no problem. But now that we don't have that ability, how are you going to grow business with the products that you're making? And so it's crucial to have an email list through MailChimp and have a platform for promoting your products. And Instagram and Facebook, all those places are great portals for doing that. So it doesn't make any sense to promote though if you don't have followers. And sometimes it takes money to create an ad so that you can get more of a push on the amount of eyes that are looking at something, and hopefully that translates to sales. So I think that's another thing I'm really trying to push is get a following large enough and a subset of customers that are big enough to where I don't have to do Comic Cons anymore. I'm just shipping stuff out from my home and using those funds to reinvest into some new product that I want to make, like maybe another toy or a sketchbook or pins or T-shirts or whatever, and then piggybacking on my following and my email list to get the sales I need for to help grow that business.
Absolutely, and that is a bit of a challenge right now, especially with the pandemic and Comic Cons not happening like they used to.
Yeah.
That's definitely something that's a little more trickier for sure.
Yeah.
So I mean, last couple.
Go ahead, please.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I feel bad because when I was doing Comic Cons, there was a lot of colleagues and friends I was making that solely relied on the Comic Con circuit for their income, and they would travel around the country with their van and set up their tables or their booths, and that's how they, in large part, how they made a living. So I really feel for those kind of artists right now, because I can only imagine they're struggling a lot, and they're trying to new angles on advertising and creating a business that is more based of shipping stuff out of their house rather than traveling and showcasing your work in these places. So anyway, sorry.
No worries at all. I totally agree with you. There are a lot of artists out there that rely on that. So it's definitely been a challenge to kind of move and work around not having those events happening around the country.
Yeah.
Now, my last question for you, my favorite one of the entire episode, takes kind of everything, puts in a nice bow. If there's a kid out there watching this right now that's interested in getting into the industry, or now just even a little more curious about it, what do you think the one thing they should learn from watching this episode is?
Don't be discouraged. You're at an age right now where you can explore absolute creative freedom, try new things. Don't get discouraged, and draw and paint and use your imagination as much as you can every single day. When I was a kid, when I came home from school, I would obviously play with my friends and do all that kind of stuff. But after dinner, I would retreat to my room and I would just draw. And my mom would buy all these art books, and I would pour through them and get inspired, and I would just draw and paint. And I had my little cassette player with the Wrath of Khan from Star Trek or whatever, and I would just be in my own space, and I'd just be creating, and I just always knew I wanted to be an artist, and so my ultimate message is to just not let go of your passion, and if you don't have one, try and find one, that's pretty much it. Just stay inspired.
Love it. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. There is a wealth of information in there that I hope all my kiddos out there learned from, because there was a lot of great stuff in there that can be so useful, especially when you're just getting into the industry for the first time, because there's not that many resources out there right now that exactly tell you everything you need to know. So I think it's really cool to hear it directly from the source, and especially since you've worked on so many incredible things in this industry, which I am excited to hear all the kiddos' thoughts on what they thought of this episode for sure. But now comes my favorite part of the episode, where I'm going to show you what I was making of you as we were chatting. I'm going to warn you ahead of time. My light in here, in my studio, it's so messed up. It likes to mess with the colors on my screen. So I will send you an actual copy, but I'm going to try my best to get this up in here without any issues.
I can't wait to see it.
Let's see.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy!
Yay!
You're so good at portraits. That's amazing. Wow.
Thank you. Well, thank you again so much.
I've never had anyone do a portrait of me. That's amazing. Wow.
You see, this is the rewarding fact of this show, because now I hadn't had a lot of artists on here for a while, and lately I've had more artists come on here. It's nice being able to flip the coin and be like, you draw everything else, so I'm going to draw you now. This is good.
It's really cool. You did an amazing job. And I mean,
thank you.
For all you kids out there, I will say, as an artist myself, to be able to direct an interview and then accurately draw someone's face, that's a talent all on itself. So kudos to you.
Thank you. Well, thank you again so much for joining us today. I had a blast getting to chat with you, and I hope my kiddos enjoyed this episode too. Catch you guys next time. Again, I'm your host and in-house artist, Taryn Leffler. See you next time on the drawing board.
Take care.
we can get going.
I got my Starbucks. I got my Starbs. I'm good.
I got my coffee. I'm raring to go today.
Nice.